First is a very important date. It's only days away. I'm going to get into it as we go, and we're also going to review the Fed's press conference today here on Jay's Corner. Welcome. It's March 31st. No, it's March 23rd, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. My name is J.O. I am the author of Maximize Your Medicare, and I am also an education fellow at the Alliance for Lifetime Income. It's a nonprofit. In addition to that, I am a certified financial planner. And all of that type of things here, you can reach me here. The most important part here, the central hub, if you will, sits over here, jo.substack.com. Thank you so much to all the new subscribers. Be sure also to subscribe and like this video. Hopefully you'll get something from it. I promise to you you'll get something from it. That I promise to you. And hit the notification bell so that you know the next time that new videos are being posted. We're going to do far better on YouTube. I realize, it's YouTube's world. I'm just living in it. So a lot of events, a lot. And we're going to start here with headlines which have nothing to do with the Fed, but they have to deal with Doge, which continues to grab the headlines. And of course, as usual, being unscripted, I've got to mention that there are tiers to the Substack. The first one is free. You can have that. That is the page that I showed you here. In addition to that, inside are certain articles, mentions, extra information, videos for paid subscribers. I just posted one the other day, meaning yesterday, right? This is the cover, right? Which is for Medicare people, Medicare beneficiaries. There's Medicare Advantage versus Medigap. And then within Medigap, this is Plan G versus Plan N is where the debate centers. There are tons of videos online comparing the two. What has not changed from my book from the time that the first edition came out over a decade ago is the logic, the way that you think through. And everything here is going to be consistent because my reasoning here on the things that you have to consider, those ideas don't change. What changes is the price, of course, and then in addition to that is how you would think about it. How you would think about it. So for newcomers, this is brand new. For people who are already on Medigap, rest assured I have not changed course in my explanation to you because the principles of understanding haven't changed. That is the consistency amongst all of the editions of Maximize Your Medicare. Okay, now we're back to the show. Doge continues to affect people now, and if anything, the number of people that are going to be affected is about to increase a lot, right? We've had lots of headlines about U.S. aid. Does anybody care about Nebraska? We've got employees at the federal government, the FEH, that are part of OPM. That can be temporary employees or probationary employees, I guess is the correct term, plus those people who have had careers at the federal government. I've discussed a lot of that in the past. I'm going to touch on it a little bit more in a few minutes, but the show has not yet really begun, right? Which is, we still have more veterans changes, as well as Medicaid. And Medicaid is the enormous elephant in the room. It's not the elephant in the room because it's not sitting in the corner anymore. It's going to come to the front and center. It's going to sit on the coffee table. And this is what I've been saying, and I've said this to my contacts in the media, which is that the one that is going to start dominating for me is going to be Medicaid. And it's just because of sheer size. 80 million people on Medicaid. 80 million. In addition to that, something like 2/3 of the population, according to Kaiser Family Foundation, the source you should get for actual data. 2/3 of the population directly know someone who is a Medicaid beneficiary. So quick review for those people who get the terms, mixed up. Medicare is for 65-year-olds and above. Medicaid is financial assistance, a partnership between federal and local, federal and state. That's what I meant by local. Okay, so let's first review what's in the headlines. And with a kind reminder, the only one that I've got so far highlighted, right, is I don't care who is saying it. I care about what. Right? So much of financial information is focused on the who. I get that to some degree. So the issue is that someone who you thought you believed their message, which can be me too. I get it. So you could be I could be throwing a stone at myself, right? Says something that is just not correct. Now I'm gonna not, but you can see my point, which is here. Let me just bring this up. So this is obviously a very polarizing person for those of you who live in the current events cave or underneath a rock. That doesn't make every statement wrong.
No, I didn't. It didn't say that. But here's what it is. They voted on a budget that cuts $880 billion from the committee that's in charge of Medicaid.
That is correct. Right, like I said, if I put a cross here and just put someone else's face, your favorite person, whoever that would be, who transmits information, this is factually correct. The fact that they will not take Medicaid, I find very a huge disconnect with facts. And that's my point here, is the fact is correct. That the agreement to avoid the shutdown includes a cut to the Department of Energy, which is responsible for Medicaid. She's right. She's right on the fact. So I have stated in prior weeks, please go and see them after you're done today on what those people should do. And the number one, just briefly, is first of all, today, not tomorrow, today, go online and verify your status. If you are you are on Medicaid. If your friend is on Medicaid, if your neighbor has been on Medicaid, it doesn't matter. You need to check your status online. And if it's not clear online, you need to go to and call your Department of Health and Human Services, your state agency, to verify your status. Because what is happening here is a complicated set of stuff, almost literally hours worth of explanations. The state determines your Medicaid eligibility, not the federal government, the state. Now, to some people who are on Medicaid already, you've already been a Medicaid beneficiary. This is not news to you, right? You know that you're calling your state branch. You're not calling the federal government. To those people on Medicaid, this is not news. To those people who are not on Medicaid, this is entirely new. And this is the reason I've slowed down here. Because now you can understand how distorted the messages are that you're being provided in the public. And I made a point of it here in the newsletter, and I also continue to make that point here, which is so what has happened here is I've spliced up. This can be overbearing. I'm not going to kid you, right? Because there are so many different topics here. I get it. I totally get it, because the reason I know, because I'm trying to organize it for you. I'm like swamped on this alone. But my point is here under gh2benefits.com, which is my firm, I spliced all the posts in by topic. Okay, and over here I've got. No, we don't have it. No, in fact, we've got even more, which is there's an article there that says, "Show me you're incompetent without telling me you're incompetent." When I see something that says the Washington is the one responsible handing out Medicaid to immigrants who are unlawfully here, that's wrong. That's entirely wrong. It is not the federal government. It's not federal waste. It is at the state. The state and the state alone is determining whether or not a person is Medicaid eligible. The fact that we have any confusion, conflation, you're mixing up different stuff because those people don't have the correct information, or they're not communicating it accurately, or they are intentionally mixing up topics that don't belong together. Now you can understand why I look and sound so aggravated. Because I have no problem with the idea that there can be excess spending that for which Medicaid is not intended and it needs to be more efficient. I'm okay with that as a statement. The idea that the federal government then slashes, or the federal government has power to take away Medicaid from an illegal immigrant, is factually untrue. It's the state. And that's why the same thing can be said about Medicare and Social Security. We can have wrongdoing in terms of, okay, well, someone's getting Social Security when they didn't deserve. There's the question about paying back for those people who got excess payments. The payback process was stopped as a result of COVID. It is restarting. That's true. That's fine. Those are errors at Social Security, but it's not as a result of illegal immigrants. That is not the reason. Why? Because they needed to have a green card. Okay, so the point here is, if you're going to tell me that the green card process is wrong, okay, that again is a separate topic, and from which that I'm open to that. But the idea that we're just like the fraud, waste, and abuse is the result of illegal immigrants, of which is not sized here either, right? It's not the federal government, right? There can be loopholes or somebody's taking advantage of other regulations, but it's not at the federal government. So the idea that the fix is at the federal government is just weird to me. You'd have to overhaul a bunch of things, which I could do. I've already proposed that on a different video, right? That I could fix healthcare. Yeah, could we fix it? Could we eliminate a lot of the waste and abuse? Sure. I'm not disputing that as a principle. What I'm saying is how to fix it is wrongly directed, misdirected, because the facts aren't correct. Even Medicaid expansion. So you can know that I have spoken a lot about how to lower health insurance premiums, as well as out-of-pocket maximums and deductibles, called the cost sharing reduction. A lot of videos here on this channel, the Substack, hint, right? I'll keep trying. I'm going to get better at this. Like and subscribe to the channel. There are tons of different segments where I've talked about these topics. Tons. The Medicaid expansion does require in other words, you don't get to just roll up and get this lower health insurance at zero for a bronze plan. You don't. You have to file a tax return, right? And you have to keep filing. So the idea that you're really out there as an illegal, a person who is not lawfully here and roll up and be able to just get Medicaid expansion, that's just not the place where you fix. Okay, so again, this is at the state level where Medicaid and these expansion programs exist, not really at the federal level. So this fix here is on Medicaid as a whole. Okay, does the ripple effect going to go down to the states? Sure. But it's going to affect everyone on Medicaid, of which a small fraction are the people who went to the state and manipulated to get Medicaid incorrectly. Even then, they needed to have a green card. You see what I'm saying? A lot of hysteria is wrongly placed. What you are left with is the fact, right? If you eliminate, right, it's the Dr. Spock from Star Trek, right? You just, or for those people who read Sherlock Holmes, which I did not, right? Apparently, right? Which is you eliminate what is impossible, and all that drops out is what's possible, is what must be true, and that was true. What she said here is true. You're cutting $880 billion from the department who is directly responsible for the funding of Medicaid. Now, does that mean all 880 comes directly from Medicaid? No, I didn't say that, right? I said that it's going to be very, very, very difficult, i.e. almost impossible, to cut that amount from that department without affecting Medicaid, of which there are 80 million recipients. Just saying. Okay, so I spent some time here to clarify this topic because it's very complicated and because of the sheer size here. Please, the bottom line is your public service announcement. I realize I've spent 15 minutes on it. Your public service announcement ultimately is please check your eligibility. If you are ineligible, you should have received notice. We need dates because if you are ineligible and you just find out about it, then you can get entry into the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. That is entirely possible. That's entirely possible. And I've taken you through other videos to tell you that this is possible now. But I need to know, and we've helped many who found out that they were ejected from Medicaid. They got a letter in the mail saying, I'm ejected from Medicaid. The issue is that some people don't know they've been ejected from Medicaid. They didn't ask. They didn't know to ask. The point of this first 20 minutes. Please. Other people are going to be affected here. And March 31st, as I stated, this date is super important. So veterans and FEHB for people who do not know, those are for federal employees. So it's part of Office of Personnel Management. FEHB is called Federal Employee Health Benefits. U.S. Postal is slightly separate, but very closely related. And I'm going to tell you that this thing is now front and center on my mind. I will be appearing on multiple locations in the media, in, for example, talk radio and things like that in the coming days. Under Medicare, this first quarter is pretty important. One of the two things that is most important is that people can enroll in Part B. It used to be called general election period, right? You can enroll in Part B. The reason I bring this up today is that, as you know, to veterans, to those people who have relied on Veterans Administration, that it is complicated itself, that certain people, if we look at va.gov, And I spoke about this last week. If you look on va.gov and you enter Medicare in here, what you will find is that the VA itself has stated, hey, you know, nothing assures the funding to VA. Right? That nothing. If you go here, this is what it'll say. Here. And in fact, this is one of those locations where a government website is actually making a recommendation. There are not very many, right? IRS doesn't give you tax guidance. IRS.gov doesn't give you tax guidance. You should have a Roth or something like that, or IRA. They don't say that. They tell you what you can do. This is that site which says, yes, we encourage you to sign up for Medicare. And then they go on, and the point here is that funding could change in the future. This is an issue. Maybe. I'm not here to give you that specific guidance, right? I'm just giving you insight on what the VA is saying. I still, my email down there, you can ask me for zero on what I think about your specific situation. I'm not going to get a, tailored answer, customized answer here on YouTube Live. Definitely not. Right? I won't have a recording either, which will have that. That would be private. My point here is that you cannot apply for this on April 1. I said March 31st is the important day. That also by implication means that on April 1, which is Tuesday, it will be too late. We are literally days away. And for those of you who are above 65, well above 65, above 66, candidly, right? You may face a late enrollment penalty for under Part B that'll be unavoidable. Crazy people write books all about these types of matters, right? Which is that, hey, you can make the choices here that you want. I understand that, but understand the ripple effects are, as va.gov said, and now if this worries you, that March 31st is an important date. I would absolutely think that would be at least worth your consideration, at least worth people to think through, because thinking through it on April 2nd will not help you. It will not help you. It is that urgent. For federal employees, it is still too soon to tell. As of today, if let's just say, for example, you are a current retiree of the federal government, the rules are not different. Can they change? There are proposals to change. And now you can see why I started with VA, where we know it is true, to FEHB, we don't know if it's true, which makes it, I realize that makes this more unsettling. I realize that. What has happened to my book? I wish I were better at videography, or I'm too busy to make sure every last detail is right? Because I wanted to make this book in front of the lettering. Nope, still behind. Still incompetent videography. Okay. That you'll see what the problem could be. You're 67. You've stayed on FEHB. You've not enrolled in Part B. You now have FEHB because your spouse was 63. You stayed on employee plus one, employee plus family, without taking Part B. There may have been rational reason for it. Now, what is being proposed right now is that they change that you need to be on Part B. And there's rationale for that, which is that the cost of self plus one for people will decline, meaning the federal government's expenditure would decline. There's a rationale here. The problem is that then the 67-year-old retiree would be subject to this late enrollment penalty that is unavoidable. Right? So in other words, what we have today is that certain people have not enrolled in Part B intentionally. Some of those people didn't know that there was going to be a late enrollment penalty. Some of them did know there would be a late enrollment penalty and did it anyway because they said, okay, well, I'm just going to stay on FEHB. That presumed that the FEHB rules stayed the same. Now, this proposal here is that, oh, well, we may require you to have Part B. And now all of a sudden, this first rule stays and this first issue now persists. Last point I'm going to make about that is that the precedent exists. On this requirement. Oops. Dyslexic this morning. TRICARE for life. So, the Rolls Royce, if you will, for career military people, thank you so much for your service, is the fact that those people on TRICARE for life are required to have Part B already. So in other words, even though the money comes from different location, which is true, right? VA is not funded the same way as Medicare. It's not. The money comes from different spots. But what I'm saying is here, the idea of having someone paid by any part of or benefits provided by the federal government as a whole, and the requirement to have Part B, the precedent exists, and there it is, that TRICARE for life. By the way, I'm going to formally say, or as I've stated in every edition of Maximize Your Medicare, I find the idea that TRICARE for life would be under threat as close to zero as you can get. I can't tell you 100% that it's going to be no chance, but it's darn close. That's what I would say. I lose zero winks as a result of worrying about our TRICARE for life people that we've discussed with people. No. So, as you can hear, very complicated, and a lot of ramifications, and very time sensitive. Very. It keeps going. For existing Medicare Advantage members, so now you're not part of the federal government. Actually, yes, you're not part of the federal government dealing with these other issues that are urgent for March 31st for the rest of Medicare people. Okay, so now, let's just call it 66 million people on Medicare, half on a Medicare Advantage plan. Some of that, a notable amount on group Medicare Advantage plan, because that's your retiree plan, is a form of Medicare Advantage. That March 31st also represents the time that Medicare Advantage members can cancel or change their plan. March 31st. So if you are a Medicare Advantage plan member and you've enrolled by yourself with a broker, whatever, if you've done so on an independent basis, you have through the end of March to change. You have one time to change, once. You can change to any other Medicare Advantage plan in your location. This is different than moving, for example, mid-year. Then you do have a different set of rights. I'm just talking about you're in a location, you're staying in that location. You still have that right to change once. There can be reasons to change. They can be very rational. I've already stated this umpteen times over the years. Your network has changed. You didn't realize. Your prescription coverage had changed. You did not realize. There are some extra benefit. Your dental needs are more demanding, and another plan has better dental benefits. It is so competitive in Medicare Advantage that I tell existing clients or prospective clients, people say, Jay, can you help me help a Medicare Advantage plan? In certain locations, it is so competitive that dental and vision can be the tiebreaker. That's how competitive it is. That's not that surprising to me. If you wanted to go, and which is not part of this spreadsheet because most of it was trying to think of through how to explain this to you, but this is, going to Medigap is a possibility. But at this point in time, you're gonna have to be Mr. Perfect. Meaning that underwrite, and the reason for that is that underwriting for most of you is a requirement. You want to go from Medicare Advantage to Medigap, you can do so. I've always told persons that the ideal time is October 15th. But given the scrutiny here on Medicare Advantage as a whole, which I'm not going to address here today, and United Healthcare, etc., which is not alone, I've discussed it in the past, and upcoding and risk adjustment, etc. Those have been discussed ad nauseum by me, not today. I will say this one thing. You should not be receiving phone calls directly. I promise you this with 100% certainty. I'm not calling you to tell you that you can change your plan. I couldn't respond to you. If you ask me, I cannot initiate to you. If you get a phone call over the next days, that is not a lawful exercise. That is not a lawful approach. It doesn't even matter if that representative, the agent of record, is your existing agent of record on your Medicare Advantage plan. They cannot call you up and say, Mr. Smith, do you want to change to a different plan? They can't. How do you shut this stuff down? You get this phone call and you answer it. You can just simply ask the person what's their NPN. And NPN for newcomers is the national producer number. It is the very specific singular number assigned to insurance people. I have an NPN in the text below the video. It's there for you. It's there for you. It's there for you intentionally. Right? I'm not going to mislead you. I'm not going to do anything unlawful. If you have a controversy, there's my NPN. We'll take it up there. Doesn't happen. But my point is, out of transparency, by that same measure, you can then ask someone if you're not certain. Okay, just tell me what your NPN is. Click. They realize that they're not supposed to be calling you, or they give it to you and now they're in some trouble because that's not a lawful activity. That is outside of regulations. Okay. All of this stuff, and we're going to get to a segue here, which is that, okay, this is a lot of uncertainty. And you can understand that this has to do with healthcare cost planning. And this did come from the other day. Right? It bears repeating. It bears repeating every segment, every week, to be candid with you, because our financial planning clients get this question. Tell me how much your life costs. How much cash do you need to go to make ends meet? Tell me. And then we start down here, and you can see this whole thing here is all about healthcare cost planning. The entirety. Why? It's the one front of mind, meaning, okay, I'm sick. You think about, okay, how do I get to a doctor or whoever I need to, and how do I pay for the bill? You don't open up schwab.com to say, oh, my balance is higher. I have the money in this account to be able to. No, that's the wrong order of operations. You know it. I know it. Right? We simply go, okay, is my insurance in order? Why? So that you can reduce the cost, make it optimal. And then you work backwards. And in every element of your financial state, it's the same thing. Right? How much does it cost? We're not going to review every single item here. I've said this there are many videos, either talking about them independently or as a cohesive whole. Right? There's a reason I keep staying in the same principle, because I realize this is not the order that it is given to you, generally speaking. You are getting information in fragments, as if one of these is the entirety. I'm telling you slightly differently is, let's focus up here. Let's focus up here. And from there, okay, under that umbrella, these are sub-points to here to get to the objective is to make ends meet. And you only know that if you know how much stuff costs. The attachment point to all of the headlines is interest rates. Repeat after me, the people who are frequent followers. Thank you so much to Jay's Corner. Stocks for show, bonds for dough. And that basically tells you what? A comment about the importance of interest rates. So we're not going to talk about the Taylor rule and, macroeconomics 3201 here and stuff like that. But we'll just go jump right here to what's happening today. The reality is that I have dealt with high end of finance that, in a previous set of clothes, I've spoken in front of those responsible for central banking at their governments, as well as the largest investors on the planet. But the reality is that I believe that people are smart and have common sense. And very clearly, what you can hear is that consumer sentiment of everyday people is way lower. Way lower. University of Michigan, my alma mater, as you can see. My channel, my signs. But anyway, my point here is that University of Michigan sentiment indicator, the alarming thing here was that expected inflation was higher, that much higher. Current conditions, I didn't really pay attention to. Consumer sentiment, way lower. Immediately lower. And this then brings me to the occurrences of this past week. 13 minutes, that sounds about right. The Federal Reserve. So we'll go quickly here. I realize that, most people are interested in this show here, right? This is what happened. The Fed downplays growing risks, sees tariff as transitory. And this here, to me, was the point and the reason that I've called this, the airball. I was stunned. I could not believe it. And the reason I couldn't believe it is because that didn't jive with the people. The Fed is not there to appease the president in full. I'm going to have some speculation, hopefully, not reckless speculation. I try real hard not to recklessly speculate, but we'll have something here. Meaning that, to me, this was a particular level of tone deaf that just not paying attention to the fact that tariffs may be transitory, but this sentiment here is plunging. And the problem here, as I've stated in the past here, has always been that down here, that those are the persons most hurt here. I have a degree in economics, right? I told you that on a prior one that when I was at graduate school, one of my professors was a voting member at the Federal Reserve, right? So I have some book experience on the topic, and I'm stunned about this here, which is tariff is a tax, the end. And it's a regressive tax, meaning that the people who cannot afford it, they're hurt the most. Of course, the sentiment is way lower. To turn that around is not going to be that easy, right? Green onions are still $1.79. And it was strange to me because what ended up happening is, yeah, he said it was transitory, and we're not going to play the clip here, but he said, okay, yeah, he got confronted with this and he blew it off, which is basically, yeah, I realize that, the one that's painful is that the level is higher. The green onion is still, which is basically my analogy, right? Which I've used in the past. Cheerios still cost $7. Well, that's too high, but you understand my point. Green onion still $1.80, right? Lower rates of inflation don't really help you. And it certainly doesn't help the person who can afford it least, and tariffs then on top. So the idea that you would call this transitory to me was just odd. And you can see that I'm not alone, right? It's not like I'm like, hey, I'm the only one that heard that and everyone else thinks I was fine. No. And you can see here, for example, this is Twitter, and this person, Twitter, with all of its controversies, it is still the place where many qualified people enter their opinion. Wharton professor, ex-former CIO of PIMCO. This is a highly quoted macroeconomic source, and you can see it here, which is the word transitory. This was the point here. And I would have thought, and this is the part that I would very much agree with. I would have thought that particularly as a big policy mistake of earlier this decade regarding COVID, he called that transitory. And given all current, some official would show greater humility. To blow it off to say that it's just transitory, to me, lacked that humility. So what did end up happening? That said, people do take his words at face value. They rewarded the market. Here it was at 2 p.m. when the Federal Reserve announced, and we are higher from that point. So it spiked higher when he started talking, and we are basically right there. We kept that initial gain. We gave away. So you can see this thick line here. This is basically 3 p.m. on the day of the press conference. And after the digestion, some drop, and then back to unchanged from that 3 o'clock time frame, basically. Still rough. This is the year to date. Not a pretty picture here. So I'm going to then end here because what you have is that, and by end I have a sub-segment to this last portion about the market. And I've already started it, introduced it to newcomers when I said stocks for show, bonds for dough. That you'll see that this here, that the existing Treasury Secretary and the President want lower 10-year bonds, lower 10-year interest rates. Right? In theory, not necessarily wrong. Right? Not really that wrong. In and of itself, not really wrong. Let's hopefully that I can find it. I'll get it up there for you. Right? Which is, there it is. Right? They want it lower. Why? Because they want R lower so that the price of stuff, NPVs, are higher. Very easy, not that complicated to discuss. So you can see what the motivation is over time. But during the time of, my point has been the very short run doesn't get away from this. Doesn't. But ultimately, this is what they're focused on. Whether or not the everyday person still has to pay $1.79 for a bunch of green onions. Right? So eroding. And now we've got last week's talk about sequence risk, right? So now you went from 100 down, let's just say you are 100% stocks, please, hopefully not, but let's just say you're at 93. You still have to take money out. You're down lower than that because green onions still cost $1.79. And now tariffs are looming. No wonder you have this. It makes sense. I'm annoyed, right? I'm just annoyed. I eat green onions by like the tens of bunches, so I'm annoyed. But I also don't live check to check. If I relied check to check, I would be like, of course my sentiment is way lower. That makes complete sense. You can see here that there is reason, but this takes time. Right? And that's what I'm saying is that is taking the time that these people do not have. And this is my point here. I've got one other last point, and that's it down here. It is high and mighty for us, of which, of course, I'm included. Somebody on Twitter asked me, where were you born? Are you an immigrant? I said, yeah. We're all immigrants. I was born in Buffalo, New York, but okay. Sure. That's in the United States for those of you who are not great at geography. Anyway, my point is that, you can say this all you want. But we have investors where lots of the money is not only in the United States, and they're looking around the globe. I've said that I've lived on 3 continents. And what do we see here? We see over here in these columns that I'm giving you in the pink that while the United States interest rates have gone down, that abroad interest rates have gone up. And they've gone up a lot. This is a big bond. These are big bond markets here. This is not, Jaeistan. It isn't. Right? These are large markets here. This is the entire EU. You can see how much higher interest rates are. So what ends up happening is global fixed income market doesn't just go and say, okay, well, all these bonds are cheaper, but this, in other words, all these interest rates are higher. This one's going to go down in isolation. That is not what happens. Why? Because Oil Fund of Norway is allocating around the planet. They go, okay, why do I need to deal with U.S. bonds they can just buy this bond at a yield after the risk for foreign exchange. Again, a very complicated, far more complicated than I'm giving you the watered down version so that you can understand. On the backdrop, I've given other segments about foreign exchange risk, right? Bonds for dough, foreign exchange laughs at everyone else as a minor leaguer. That would be correct. The point here is back to the show here, and my point here is, yeah, you can jawbone all you want. My guess is that probably explains this. And you don't want that, they've been, over this past week, there's been revelation that they meet for talk and food. My thought here is that probably the gloss, if I had to speculate anything, this was so weird to me. I'm like, what? And then what I might think is that while his job is to me secure, that probably, hey, can we make the messaging a little less alarmist? Can we make it a little less this over here to cause worry? Because we've got these other battles. We want it lower, but the issue, the fly in the ointment to all of that is the fact that other markets around the planet are not cooperating here. This becomes the struggle. This, I suspect, will be the struggle that will not be in the headlines, but actually the professional market is looking here. It explains a lot about why then, for example, the US dollar here, even with the big story in global financial markets, is not NASDAQ down by 7% for the year. The big story here is that you've gone from 102 to 109 in 3 months. This is an enormous move. We were thinking here at the beginning of the year that people were thinking that dollar to euro at par. And now it has hit 110 intraday. This candle doesn't show you every time frame. 10% is just a enormous move. This is the story. And that then the ripple effect then becomes the equity market and all the ones that you're seeing in the ones that get all the news, and you get updates on Nvidia and Tesla. Last point, and then I will have this. I found this very weird. And weird is not, they could be right. The other day, during this period, I don't know what to make of this, but I want people to know about it. Okay, I don't want to hear Dan Ives. Tesla retail, buy the stock at a pace never seen before. Never seen before. We'll have to see how long, or if that's persistent, or if they're right. We don't control, can't predict direction of securities on a short-term basis. Don't even try. We need to have the understanding of the framework, stocks for show, bonds for dough. That doesn't mean that we're making any call on any security, never financial advice. There's a reason for the text below my video there. This one is one to watch for sure, because it's creating the sentiment of which the NASDAQ, that Tesla is like 4% of the NASDAQ. So the fact is that that's what Tesla is down 40% times 0.4 is 1.6. So out of this 8%, 20% of it is due to Tesla alone. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. My name's J.O. This has been Jay's Corner. I'll see you next week. Next week at 10 a.m. Eastern. Be sure to share and like. Tell someone else. You know, I could run ads. I could have this, that, or the other. The reality is none of that counts for anything compared to the 5 seconds that you said, hey, check out Jay's Corner on Substack and subscribe to the free newsletter. Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.